Imagine this. You wake up one morning, stretch your arms, sip your coffee, and scroll through your messages, all while oblivious to the fact that deep beneath your conscious awareness, something else has already been awake for hours operating, influencing, deciding, without your permission. You move through your day, making choices you think are yours, the words you use in a conversation, the route you take to work, even the person you text back. But what if these choices were never fully yours to begin with? What if, right now, another version of you, a hidden, silent intelligence, is already living your life, crafting your desires, shaping your fears, and scripting your fate, all without your conscious approval? Carl Jung proposed a radical, unsettling idea that the unconscious mind is not just a passive storage space for repressed memories or forgotten dreams, but a living, breathing force, an autonomous psyche that acts with its own motives, its own goals, and even in some cases, its own personality. A life behind your life. But what does that mean for you, the person who believes you are steering the ship of your existence? Is your sense of agency merely an illusion? A comforting story you tell yourself while deeper forces silently direct your course? Are you merely the spokesperson for choices made elsewhere, in dark corridors of the psyche you've never dared to visit? Imagine realizing that your anxiety, your attractions, your self-sabotaging behaviors are not mistakes, but expressions in coded communications of this other life within you, moving with a logic older than reason itself. And here lies the paradox. We spend so much of our lives trying to control, to rationalize, to plan, but how can you control something when the very engine of your decisions is hidden from you? You strive for success, for love, for happiness, but how often do you stop to question who within you is actually striving? Is it the you know, or another part altogether? What if you've been living according to the desires of an unconscious that doesn't care about your carefully crafted goals, your polished social image, or your future ambitions? What if, while you focus on achieving the next promotion, deep within your psyche, another force is pulling you towards collapse, because collapse is what your unconscious believes you need to grow? This is not a simple matter of suppressed emotions or childhood wounds resurfacing. Jung went further. He argued that the unconscious is not content to sit quietly in the shadows. It moves in dreams, speaks in symptoms, erupts in moments of irrationality and crisis, precisely because it has its own agenda for your life. And yet, most people go their entire lives without ever suspecting this. They cling to the belief that they are in control, that their rational mind is the master of their destiny. They build elaborate plans, strive for predictability, and meticulously avoid chaos. But the unconscious, Jung's great other, thrives on the chaos we fear. It is the force that undoes us, so that we might be remade. So, you have to ask yourself, how much of your life has already been lived by this hidden self? How many of your relationships have been chosen, not by your conscious desires, but by your unconscious seeking out precisely what you most need to confront, even if it hurts you? How many times have you found yourself in patterns you swore you'd never repeat, only to realize that the same story keeps unfolding, again and again, as if guided by some unseen hand? Are you the author of your life, or merely its reader, turning the pages as they have already been written by the unconscious forces you do not understand? And if your unconscious mind is living a life without you, then what becomes of the you that you think you are? This is the great question Carl Jung forces us to confront, not in the comfortable armchair of intellectual curiosity, but in the raw, unsettling immediacy of our own experience. Because to live unaware of this inner life is not merely to be ignorant, it is to be divided, alienated from oneself, perpetually chasing symptoms without ever recognizing their source. But what, then, is the source of this hidden life? Where does it come from, and why does it operate in secrecy? Is it a trick of evolution, a necessary mechanism for survival, or is it something far more mysterious, something spiritual, perhaps even transcendent? Before we can answer these questions, we must first descend deeper into the roots of this hidden force to understand why it exists at all. The problem is not only personal, it is philosophical, cultural, and existential. The unconscious is not just a part of you, it is a world unto itself. And to begin exploring it, we must first understand the conditions that gave rise to this split within the human psyche. We must ask, how did we come to be so alienated from the most vital parts of ourselves? Let's go deeper. The human mind was never designed to be a unified, orderly domain. From the very beginning, there has been a fracture and internal division so ancient and so pervasive that most of us no longer notice it. But Carl Jung noticed, and he dedicated his life to mapping this hidden territory, insisting that the unconscious is not merely a repository of forgotten thoughts, but a vast autonomous system with its own patterns, desires, and intelligence. Where did this split come from? To answer this, we must trace the evolution of consciousness itself. Once upon a time long before the modern age of rationality, human beings lived immersed in what Jung called the participation mystique, a state of undifferentiated oneness with nature, the tribe, and the cosmos. In these ancient times, there was no rigid boundary between self and other, between conscious intent and unconscious impulse. Life was lived instinctively, organically. But then something extraordinary and tragic occurred. We developed self-awareness. The ego emerged as a distinct center of consciousness. This was the birth of modern humanity, the dawning of reflective thought, of civilization, of progress. But it came at a terrible cost, the severance from the unconscious. This split, the alienation of the conscious ego from its unconscious roots, is the hidden problem at the core of modern existence. As Friedrich Nietzsche warned, when you look long into an abyss, the abyss also looks into you. The abyss he spoke of is not some external void, but the internal unknown we've learned to fear and avoid. We call ourselves rational, logical creatures, but that rationality is perched precariously atop an ocean of unconscious drives, instincts, and archetypes. The more we identify with our conscious mind, the more we repress, deny, and exile these deeper forces. But they do not disappear. They only grow more autonomous, more insistent, operating in the dark with increasing power precisely because they have been ignored. Carl Jung, more than any other psychologist, understood that the unconscious compensates for the one-sidedness of consciousness. If your conscious mind insists on perfection, your unconscious will produce chaos. If your conscious mind seeks only pleasure, your unconscious will engineer pain. This is not punishment. It is nature's attempt to restore wholeness, to reintegrate what has been split. Yet modern culture only exacerbates the problem. We live in a world that prizes control, efficiency, predictability. From childhood, we are taught to suppress our emotions, to master our instincts, to present a curated version of ourselves to the world. We are told that reason is superior to intuition, that success is more important than authenticity, that productivity is the highest good. But beneath this socially conditioned persona, the mask that Jung called the persona lies an unconscious that refuses to be tamed. Philosophers like Arthur Schopenhauer long ago recognized that human beings are driven by a will that defies reason a blind, irrational striving that propels us forward, often against our better judgment. Jung took this further by arguing that this will is not singular but manifold. The unconscious is populated by what he called complexes, semi-autonomous subpersonalities that hijack our behavior in moments of stress, love, conflict, or crisis. Think about it. Have you ever said something in a fit of rage that you later could not believe came from you? Have you ever fallen in love with someone who, in hindsight, was completely wrong for you, but at the time it felt irresistible, as if you were under a spell? These are not just bad decisions. These are moments when your unconscious took the reins. Yet we persist in the illusion that we are unified beings in control of our destiny. Jean-Paul Sartre, once argued that human beings are condemned to be free, thrust into existence without a guide, forced to create meaning from nothing. But Jung countered this existential view with a more nuanced insight. We are not as free as we think, because much of what shapes our choices originates in the unconscious. True freedom is not the denial of the unconscious, but the integration of it. The hidden problem, then, is this. Modern individuals live in profound ignorance of their unconscious life. They mistake the contents of their conscious mind for the whole of their being, while neglecting the vast underworld of motives and fears that actually steer their course. The psychologist Viktor Frankl, a survivor of the concentration camps, wrote that between stimulus and response, there is a space. For Jung, that space is inhabited by the unconscious dynamic, creative force that can either enslave you or empower you, depending on whether you choose to acknowledge it. But acknowledging it is terrifying. To confront the unconscious is to admit that you are not fully in control, that parts of you may harbor desires, resentments, and potentials you have long suppressed. It is to admit that your carefully constructed identity may be only a fragment of who you truly are. And here is where the tension builds, because most people cannot bear this realization. They double down on the illusion of control. They cling to superficial goals, immerse themselves in distractions, or scapegoat others for their unhappiness, all to avoid facing the truth that their unconscious is living a life without them. Yet the more they resist, the more the unconscious retaliates. It sabotages relationships, manifests as psychosomatic illness, triggers inexplicable fears, or leads to existential crises that defy rational explanation. The unconscious, Jung warned, will make itself known whether you like it or not. So the question becomes, will you choose to explore this hidden part of yourself voluntarily, or will you wait until it erupts uncontrollably into your life? The answer to this question determines everything: your psychological health, your relationships, your sense of meaning, and ultimately, your ability to live as a whole human being. But before we can consider how to engage this mysterious force, we must first understand its consequences. What happens when we continue to live divided, when we persist in the illusion that our unconscious mind is not already living a life we have never dared to see? Let's descend further. Imagine walking through a house you've lived in your entire life, confident that you know every room, every corner. But one day, by chance, you stumble upon a hidden door you never noticed before. Behind it lies an entire wing, vast and filled with forgotten objects, haunting memories, and unfamiliar voices whispering your name. This is what it feels like to catch even the faintest glimpse of your unconscious mind. Yet most people never find that door. They live confined to a few familiar rooms, unaware that their life is being shaped by forces in that hidden wing. And this ignorance has consequences that ripple through every choice, every relationship, every moment of suffering and joy. Carl Jung warned that what you fail to make conscious will control your life, and you will call it fate. Let that sink in. Your unconscious mind could be orchestrating your life's most pivotal moments, while you blindly attribute them to luck, destiny, or other people's actions. Think of the patterns you've repeated, the relationships that fell apart in eerily similar ways, the opportunities you sabotaged without knowing why, the anxieties that struck without any logical cause. These are not random. They are the signature of an unconscious mind acting out its narrative. You may tell yourself that you're unlucky in love, that you always pick the wrong partners. But what if it's not chance at all? What if your unconscious is compelling you to seek out relationships that recreate unresolved wounds from childhood, forcing you into painful repetitions in the hope that finally you might awaken and heal? Neurological research supports this view. The brain is wired to favor familiar patterns, even if they hurt us. Trauma, unprocessed emotions, and unmet needs are encoded not just as memories, but as templates for future behavior. These templates become automated, playing out below the level of awareness, like a hidden operating system that runs your life. You think you're choosing freely, but your choices are often a reaction to unconscious programming you've never examined. On a societal level, the consequences are even more profound. Entire cultures are shaped by collective unconscious patterns, what Jung called the collective, unconscious, a vast reservoir of archetypes and primordial images that guide human behavior across generations. Consider the modern obsession with productivity and achievement. We are told from every direction that success is the ultimate measure of worth. But beneath this cultural narrative lies a collective unconscious fear and significance, of death, of confronting the emptiness within. And so we work harder, chase more status, accumulate more possessions, all in a desperate bid to drown out the voice of the unconscious that whispers, "You are more than what you do." But the unconscious does not tolerate neglect forever. When ignored, it manifests as what Jung termed the shadow, the disowned parts of the psyche that we refuse to acknowledge. The shadow emerges in moments of irrational anger, envy, or prejudice, in self-destructive behaviors, or in projections onto others. We see in them what we refuse to see in ourselves. Have you ever met someone who inexplicably irritated or terrified you? Perhaps they embodied traits you consciously despise: arrogance, cruelty, recklessness. But what if they only disturbed you because they mirrored aspects of your own unconscious that you varied? This is the price of ignoring the unconscious. It turns others into scapegoats, society into a battleground of projections, and the self into a fragmented being, divided against itself. At the collective level, the consequences can be catastrophic. Jung saw this most clearly in the rise of totalitarian regimes in the 20th century. He believed that the collective refusal to confront the shadow within led entire nations to project their darkness onto scapegoated groups, culminating in violence, war, and genocide. Even today, we see this dynamic play out in political polarization, in the demonization of those who think differently, in the inability to engage in honest dialogue. These are all symptoms of a society controlled by unconscious forces it refuses to recognize. On a personal level, the most tragic consequence is a life unlived. When your unconscious runs your life without your awareness, you risk never becoming who you truly are. Jung called this missed potential the tragedy of the unlived life, a fate far worse than failure or disappointment. It is the quiet, knowing regret of realizing, too late, that you never claimed your deepest desires, never explored your unique path, never listened to the voice within that beckoned you toward authenticity. Instead, you lived according to inherited scripts, societal expectations, and unconscious compulsions. Perhaps you pursued a career to please your parents, entered a marriage to avoid loneliness, or stayed silent when your soul screamed for expression. All the while, your unconscious was shaping these decisions, not as punishment, but as an invitation to wake up. But most people do not wake up. They cling to their surface identity, desperately maintaining the illusion of control, while their unconscious quietly dictates the terms of their existence. They rationalize their suffering, medicate their anxiety, or seek external fixes for internal discontent, never realizing that the true source of their turmoil lies within. And so they live trapped, chained not by external circumstances, but by their refusal to acknowledge the inner life that continues without them. But here is the paradox. The unconscious is not your enemy. It is not a malevolent force seeking to destroy you. Rather, it is the part of you that seeks your wholeness, your completeness. It manifests in symptoms, crises, and even breakdowns because it longs to be integrated. The panic attack that strikes out of nowhere, the depression that will not lift, the dream that keeps recurring, these are not random malfunctions. They are signals from the unconscious, attempts to break through the walls of repression and denial. The question is, will you listen? The unseen consequences of ignoring your unconscious are profound: personal suffering, relational dysfunction, societal division, and existential emptiness. But they are not inevitable. There is another path, a rebellion against the tyranny of unconscious programming, a radical act of turning inward to confront and integrate the parts of yourself you have long disowned. But how do you break free from a force that has been living your life without you? That is where we must go next. Imagine standing at the edge of a dark forest, its trees towering, tangled, and impenetrable. For years, you've walked safely along the well-lit road outside, following signs laid out by society, obeying the rules of family, culture, and logic. But now, you sense something pulling you into that forest, a call from within, from the very depths you've avoided all your life. This is the moment of rebellion, the point where you stop running from your unconscious mind and dare, for the first time, to step into its shadows. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the courageous journey of integrating the unconscious into conscious awareness, reclaiming the lost, hidden parts of yourself, and becoming a whole person rather than a fragmented mask. But make no mistake, this is not a comfortable path. It is a rebellion against everything you have been taught about success, happiness, and identity. The first act of this rebellion is to stop asking superficial questions. How can I be more productive? How can I be liked? And instead ask, who am I, really? Not the version that smiles in photographs or recites polished answers at dinner parties, but the real you, the one that exists beneath all the roles you've been assigned. To begin, you must turn toward your symptoms, the anxiety, the sadness, the recurring nightmares, not as problems to be fixed, but as messages from the unconscious. They are not random. They are clues, keys to the locked rooms within you. Consider the practice of dream analysis, one of Jung's primary methods for engaging the unconscious. In dreams, the unconscious speaks in symbols, not in the language of reason, but in the ancient, mythic language of the soul. The snake that bites you, the house you cannot find your way out of, the stranger who guides or betrays you, each is a fragment of your own psyche, demanding recognition. When you record your dreams, reflect on their symbols, and ask what part of you they represent, you begin to converse with your unconscious instead of being ruled by it. This is the first strike against its autonomous control. But this rebellion also requires confronting your shadow, the parts of you that you have judged, suppressed, or denied. It may be your anger, your vulnerability, your sensuality, your ambition qualities you buried because they were unacceptable to your family, your culture, or your own idealized self-image. Jung warned that until you make the shadow conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. But when you face your shadow voluntarily, you reclaim its energy and transform it from a hidden saboteur into a conscious ally. This is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming whole. Historical figures who undertook this inner rebellion illustrate its transformative power. Think of Siddhartha Gautama the Buddha, who left the palace of comfort to confront suffering, desire, and death directly. Or Nietzsche, who declared the death of God not to destroy meaning, but to compel humanity to create meaning from within, to forge their own values in the face of existential freedom. Even in contemporary life, those who break cycles of generational trauma, who abandon careers that stifle their soul, or who end toxic relationships despite fear, are rebels against the unconscious scripts that would otherwise dictate their lives. Yet, the world resists this rebellion at every turn. Modern culture is designed to keep you asleep, to keep you scrolling, consuming, producing, endlessly distracted from the work of self-confrontation. It offers instant gratification in place of deep fulfillment, surface-level connections instead of authentic intimacy, entertainment instead of introspection. To rebel against this is to turn your attention inward, to sit in uncomfortable silence, to journal not just your achievements, but your fears, your wounds, your longings. It is to create space for solitude, for reflection, for the slow, patient work of self-exploration. And perhaps most radically, It is to embrace the idea that you are not a fixed entity, but a dynamic, evolving process. This is the hardest truth. The you who has been living according to unconscious patterns is not your destiny. You can change. But change requires death, the symbolic death of the false self you've built to survive, to please, to fit in. It requires letting go of certainty and stepping into the unknown, trusting that beyond the forest of the unconscious lies not annihilation, but renewal. This is why Jung insisted that the goal of life is not happiness, as modern culture proclaims, but wholeness, the integration of all parts of the psyche, both light and dark. But beware, the unconscious does not yield easily. It will resist your rebellion with distractions, doubts, and the comfort of old patterns. It will whisper, "Stay where it's safe. Don't look too closely. You might not like what you find." And yet the call persists. You will know you are making progress not when life becomes easier, but when it becomes more real, when your choices feel aligned not with what others expect of you, but with the deepest truths that rise from within. You will find that your relationships shift as you stop projecting your shadow onto others and instead own it. You will discover that your work becomes more meaningful, not because you earn more, but because it expresses something authentic within you. And you will notice that your suffering changes from something that crushes you to something that teaches you. This is the alchemy of inner rebellion, turning the lead of unconscious compulsion into the gold of conscious choice. The reward is nothing less than your own soul. But this rebellion is not a one-time act. It is a lifelong process of engagement, reflection, and integration. It is a daily choice to confront the parts of yourself that you would rather ignore, to question the motives behind your actions, and to listen to the subtle, often uncomfortable messages that arise from within. And so the question remains, will you continue to live as a passenger in a life driven by unconscious forces, or will you seize the reins and chart a path toward wholeness? Yet even now, as you prepare to rebel, there is still a deeper truth waiting to be uncovered, a truth that changes not just how you see yourself, but how you see reality itself. Let's go there, to the final and most powerful realization. Imagine waking up not just from sleep, but from the entire dream of who you thought you were. The rebellion has begun. You've dared to confront the unconscious, to listen to its strange and unsettling messages, to face your shadow and integrate your disowned parts. But now, standing in the center of this inner landscape, you realize something that shatters even the framework of your rebellion. There was never a strict separation between your conscious self and the unconscious life within you. All along, they were one. The ultimate truth is not that your unconscious mind is living a life without you, but that your unconscious mind is you. It always was. The boundary between the self you know and the forces you feared is an illusion, an evolutionary convenience, a thin membrane erected to help you function in the world. But in reality, there has only ever been one psyche, one totality, moving through different levels of awareness. Carl Jung called this totality the self-capitalized to distinguish it from the narrow ego with which you typically identify. The ego is the fragment, the part, the provisional identity necessary to navigate society. But the self is the whole, conscious and unconscious, light and shadow, order and chaos, instinct and intellect. The self is not something you possess. It is what you fundamentally are. And here lies the most paradoxical realization. The unconscious was never truly living a life without you. It was simply the parts of you that you refused to live. All the instincts you repressed, the desires you denied, the fears you buried, they didn't go away. They continued their existence in the subterranean levels of your psyche, influencing your behaviors and shaping your destiny, not because they were foreign invaders, but because they were you, exiled from your own awareness. You have spent years, perhaps decades, at war with yourself, mistaking parts of your own nature as enemies, calling them irrational, dangerous, or shameful. But now, standing here, you see, they were never trying to destroy you. They were only trying to be heard, to be integrated, to be given their rightful place in the fullness of your being. This is what Jung meant when he said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not who you pretended to be, not who you were told to be, but the vast, complex, dynamic being that includes every impulse, every contradiction, every paradox within you." This realization is both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because it means there is no external force to blame. Your suffering, your repeated mistakes, your sabotaged relationships, they were not done to you by some malevolent outside power. They were expressions of the unlived parts of yourself, manifesting as fate until you had the courage to see them. But it is also liberating because it means you are no longer a victim of your unconscious. You are its author, and you always have been. The moment you realize this, everything changes. The panic attack that once crippled you becomes a message to be decoded, not a flaw to be eradicated. The recurring dream transforms into a conversation with your deeper self, not a meaningless hallucination. The relationship that ended in heartbreak is no longer a random tragedy, but a catalyst that forced you to confront parts of yourself you could no longer ignore. Life itself shifts from a battlefield of competing forces to a tapestry of interconnected threads, each one leading you back to yourself. Even your concept of control changes. You stop striving to dominate your unconscious, to subjugate your instincts under the tyranny of reason. Instead, you seek to collaborate with them, to listen, to harmonize. This is the Jungian vision of wholeness, not a life free of conflict, but a life in which conflicts are recognized, understood, and integrated into a coherent self. But here as the final twist, the realization that lifts you beyond even Jung as psychological framework and into the realm of the mystical. The self you are returning to, the integrated whole, is not merely personal. It is also collective, transpersonal, even cosmic. Jung hinted at this in his exploration of the collective unconscious, the idea that deep within you are not only your personal experiences, but the universal archetypes shared by all of humanity. The mother, the hero, the trickster, the wise old man, the innocent child. These are not just stories. They are living patterns within you, shaping your journey whether you know it or not. To integrate your unconscious is to align yourself not only with your personal history, but with the entire evolutionary story of the human psyche, and perhaps even more, with the very intelligence of life itself. This is why, in moments of deep psychological integration, people report experiences of profound interconnectedness, of being at one with nature, with humanity, with the cosmos. The walls of the ego dissolve, and you realize that the unconscious life that once seemed to threaten your autonomy was never separate from you, nor from anyone else. You are part of the great unfolding of life, a unique yet inseparable expression of a universal psyche. This is the culmination of your journey, the recognition that your unconscious mind is not an adversary to be conquered, nor a servant to be controlled, but a guide, a profound intelligence seeking your wholeness, your authenticity, your fulfillment. And once you see this, you can never unsee it. You will walk through the world differently, no longer terrified by your dreams, no longer trapped by your compulsions, no longer projecting your shadow onto others. Instead, you will carry the quiet, powerful awareness that every encounter, every emotion, every challenge is part of a deeper conversation between you and the totality of your being. This is not the end of the journey, but the beginning of a new way of living, awake, integrated, whole. As you leave this inner forest and return to the world of human affairs, you realize that the forest was never separate from you. It was your own nature calling you home. So now, the question is no longer, is your unconscious mind living a life without you? But rather, are you finally ready to live the life that includes all of you? Pause here. Breathe. Feel the immensity of that truth. Because in the end, the greatest tragedy is not that your unconscious has been living without you, but that you have been living without your unconscious. Now, you know the way back. And it begins always with the simplest, most radical act, to turn inward and to listen. If this resonated with you, subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden layers of the mind. Your journey inward has only just begun.